to join us for the next hour. My name is Ashley Walsh, and I manage SIG's Student Talent Outreach Program and our multimedia efforts. I have the pleasure of facilitating today's webinar entitled P2P Evolution, Understanding How the Past is Empowering the Future, presented by Zycus. Before I proceed, I have a couple housekeeping and calendar items I would like to review with you. Today's webinar is meant to be interactive, so please submit your questions throughout the presentation by typing them into the Q&A box. We will answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. Also, we will be sharing the slides with everyone at the end of the webinar, and we'll push them out at the conclusion. Our summits are incredible 3-day events with over 50 breakout sessions, multiple keynote speakers, entertainment, and endless networking opportunities, as well as ERT and CPO programs. The next summit is in beautiful Carlsbad, California, October 18th through the 20th, with a golf scramble in the afternoon the day before the summit. Attend one of our signature events and share them with your colleagues. Please check the SIG website frequently for upcoming cities and the current agenda. SIG hosts webinars on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Visit our website for a complete listing of upcoming webinars and register today. Town Hall teleconferences are held once a month on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. These are buy-side only open microphone events that bring a small group of executives together to discuss important topics. These sessions are never recorded, which allows for an extremely organic and natural exchange. Our next town hall is scheduled for September 14th, entitled The Myths and Reality of Procurement, Understanding and Improving Our Functional Reputation, and it will be presented by Linda H. Feehan, Senior Vice President of Global Procurement at Iron Mountain. SIG's peer-to-peer resource. This is an opportunity to ask top-of-mind questions for instant responses. These inquiries go out on Tuesday and Thursday, and you do not have to be a SIG member to respond. So please help out a fellow SIG member when you see them. SIG Resource Center. This is home to over 4,000 tools, templates, white papers, presentations, and research. Feel free to take advantage. SIG's website offers a career network with job postings for sourcing professionals and internship opportunities for students. But just as a reminder, SIG is an excellent source for senior-level opportunities and contacts, so please reach out so that we can help facilitate those conversations. Student Talent Outreach Program. This is an initiative to connect top supply chain professionals with you. These students are still honing their skills and learning about the industry. The program exposes students to sourcing and outsourcing executives, supply chain thought leadership, and best practice online content through networking events, virtual education, online resource library, and career services, including internships and opportunities in full-time careers. Please reach out if you're interested in talent acquisition through SIG Student Talent Outreach Program. Lastly, we have 15 students looking for sponsorship to attend the upcoming summit. Please reach out to me if you are interested in sponsorship opportunities. Registration is open for our Global Executive Summit in Carlsbad, California, which will be October 18th through the 20th. So mark your calendars. There will be multiple keynotes and breakout sessions and lots of time for networking. We have recently updated the summit agenda that you can view on our website at sig.org/summit. Please register early and reserve your room, as space is limited and the hotel will sell out quickly. As you know, we are expanding. Check out the event calendar on the SIG website to register for any global events coming up near you. SIG University is a new SIG program, and it is an online curriculum offered to people of all levels and sourcing careers who seek training opportunities. Each certification level consists of modules with interactive lessons, unit assessments, and a final proctored exam. Each certification is valid for 5 years. The training is asynchronous, and we are currently enrolling for our next Certified Sourcing Professional class on September 19th. The next Certified Governance Professional course launches on October 25th. We also offer a self-paced option for those who cannot commit to hard and stop dates. We are offering an additional 25% discount for early enrollment, so please reach out to any SIG team member after the webinar and we can provide more details. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's topic and speaker. Today's webinar is brought to you by Zycus, and the topic is P2P Evolution, Understanding How the Past is Empowering the Future. A very warm welcome to Rohit Nair, Marketing Lead at Zycus. He has more than 7 years of experience covering multiple facets of marketing in the IT and healthcare domain across product marketing, integrated marketing communication, analyst relations, branding, content marketing, demand generation, and event marketing. Currently, he leads a He leads the global marketing initiatives for Zycus' Procure-to-Pay solution suite. An amateur photographer at heart, Nair also likes to pen down rhyming outlets of thoughts into words in his free time. Thank you for joining us today, Rohit. With that, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Ashley, and welcome everyone for today's webinar. Before we proceed and delve into the topic of discussion today, I would just like to give everyone a brief overview about Zycus. So Zycus, as some of you would be aware, is a leading provider of source-to-pay automation solution. We offer the full suite across the spectrum of sourcing and procurement, and as you see, the graphic represented here in yellow covers the most strategic aspect of procurement, which is also referred to as upstream, including things like spend analysis, e-sourcing, contract management, supplier management, financial savings tracking, and management. The component in blue refers to the operational aspect of procurement, which often is also referred to as downstream, which covers the procure-to-pay suite, which includes requisition management, catalog management, purchase order, and invoice management. Moving ahead, talking a little bit about Zycus' journey. And as you see in the graphic here, Zycus has been rated as the top leading provider in the procurement space for past 2 years by Gartner in its Magic Quadrant for Strategic Sourcing Suite, with highest rank on ability to execute and as well as ease of use across the suite. Zycus has also been recognized for its strength in operations, technical support, and implementation services. With that, I would proceed by introducing the star speaker of the day, John Hansen. I'm sure a lot of you would be aware about John. John is the editor and lead writer for the for the PI Social Media Network's Procurement Insight blog. John has written nearly 3,000 articles and papers, as well as 5 books on subjects as diverse as supply chain practice, public sector policy, emerging business trends, and social media. In addition to being a much sought-after speaker and moderator internationally, John is also the host of the highly acclaimed PI Window on the World Show on Blog Talk Radio, which aired its 1000th episode in 2016. And to tell you something, he is actually a much sought-after speaker, and he is going to speak at Zycus' upcoming annual procurement conference, Horizon 2016. So with that, I hand it over to you, John.
Thank you, Rohit. And I have to say this, I'm going to thank my mother for writing that bio for me. She did a very good job. Anyway, great to be here with everybody. And just to let you know, I am wearing a tuxedo, so I did dress for the occasion. But one of the interesting things as we proceed with today's session, when I was asked to talk about the P2P evolution, terminology such as leading edge, disruptive innovation, all those attributes came to mind. And ironically, although it may not be apparent right out of the gate, it made me immediately think of Winston Churchill, one of my heroes, by the way, for a variety of reasons, none of which is the least of which is, or not the least of which is his unique insights of the world. But he coined the phrase, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." So what does that have to do when we're talking about P2P? What does that have to do when we talk about leading edge and innovation? Well, I'm going to set the tone for this entire discussion we're going to be having today. And I want you to remember this as the touchstone or the reference point. Technology becomes ineffective the more dependent we become on it. Therefore, when we talk about being leading edge, we have to look beyond the technology to the people behind it. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, what do you mean it becomes more ineffective the more dependent we become on it? Well, as we go through and progress through the upcoming slides, you'll discover that it's not really the technology that drives our industry, drives our profession, enables us to achieve the desired outcomes that we want. It's the people behind the technology. And far too often over the years, we've abdicated our responsibilities on our side from the buyer perspective. But even more so, we haven't looked at the vendor side of the equation and the people behind those organizations who are the service providers. And today we're going to give a look there because P2P evolution that's happening is a unique opportunity which is going to change the way in which we approach the market, we approach doing our job. And ironically, it involves technology taking a supporting role rather than a main role. So before we get into that, let's go to the first quiz, and there's going to be a number of quizzes throughout this entire series, and I believe it's going to be posted to the right side pretty soon, where we ask, how will P2P impact your job? Now, you have a few moments to do that, but I'm asking this right at the very beginning. Your perception and understanding of P2P, will it have a significant impact on your job? Will it have a moderate impact on your job, or will it have absolutely no impact on your job whatsoever? Take a few minutes, well, not even a few minutes, how about 45 seconds, to sort of indicate what your thoughts are. How will P2P impact your job? I wonder if we should have some music playing in the background, like from Jeopardy here. Okay, I think we have just another few seconds going here, and then we should have the results. And while we'll do that, I will move ahead to the next slide. All right, so on the bar graph, significantly, 19 out of 56 believe it will impact the job. 11 out of the 56 said moderately, it looks like. Nobody said not at all, and no answer. So for your no answers, I'm hoping I'm going to pick you up on the end result of this, this area, but it looks like the majority of you believe that it will. Now, what's interesting is what's the reason why you think that? Well, it may not be what we originally anticipated. Let's look at our 4 objectives for today's session. Number 1, where is P2P headed, and what is its impact going to be? Your alignment is a major contributor. In other words, how does it change your job and your responsibilities and your role? How do you leverage P2P to strengthen relationships? And that may sound like an interesting contradiction because, you know, can you actually leverage technology to improve or increase relationships? And of course, what are your immediate next steps to be able to capitalize on this? So where is P2P headed as a whole? Well, I'm going to use this quote from, or this Twitter tweet from Aaron Levy. Uber is the $3.5 billion lesson in building how the world should work instead of optimizing for how the world does work. Now, why I chose that, it was very, very interesting, is again, going back to the top of the discussion, when you think about disruptive innovation, you think about the technology having the main focus. But what Uber demonstrates is it looked at an existing process, it looked at a taxi service and being able to do those things. And, you know, there hasn't been much change over the years. Cars have become more efficient. They've added air conditioning, changed vehicles. All of these elements have changed. But basically, the business of driving somebody from point A to point B hadn't changed. What Uber realized, its disruptive innovation, was utilizing the technology, the mobile apps, and the capability to engage more people and get them more involved in delivering the service. In other words, was it the people that was the disruptive innovation? Was it the technology that was the disruptive innovation, or was it the utilization of that to engage the people? And if people didn't respond to the capability of the technology, if Uber had started and instead of bringing in people to do driving, and put aside all the issues that they have with security and the inherent problems that have been presented as a result of the Uber service and the model, but the reality is without people, that would not have worked. And that's the whole point of what is compelling about Uber, is that it leveraged technology, it created an app, and what it did is it made the ability to engage more people, but it required the people's interaction and involvement. So, what does this mean? What does Uber mean? Well, like its impact on the taxi industry, e-procurement technology is becoming commoditized in the P2P cloud. Now, what do we mean by that? commoditized. Well, you know, in the old days, and I'm going back to the days that I first came to the business, where we had the floors of mainframes, punch cards, where the K-Pro was a CPM-driven machine before even MS-DOS, let alone Windows, came onto the scene. And what was interesting about that is in those days, everything was proprietary. Everything was timely, costly, expensive. It required a great deal of expertise to extract the value from the technology. But as we move towards the cloud, we're moving towards an era of commoditization where, let's be honest, Zycus is a good company, but there are other companies that are also offering cloud-based solutions, and the inherent risks of engaging these different companies from a technological standpoint are no longer as relevant as they were many, many years ago. And my perspective on this industry is that, look, we're now moving away from a features, functions, and benefits analysis. I'm not going to you know, I noticed the Magic Quadrant Gartner reference, but Magic Quadrants and Gartners will not tell you or provide you with the differentiation you need to understand what technology or what organization with whom you will partner. So when it's commoditized from a technological standpoint, what is really the difference from one cloud-based supplier to the next? Yes, there are a few tweaks and a few functionalities that may be different, but at the end of the day, it is the people behind the company. It is the service provider capability and their ability to connect with you to extract the value from their technology that is the key. Technology becomes secondary to the people behind the organization. And in this brave new world that's coming up, it is a world of transparency, of disclosure. It is a world where the old zero-sum mindsets of relationships are being replaced by a mutual collaborative approach in an environment where there is, again, a full transparency. Now, I'm going to digress for 1 minute because Tim Cummins from IACCM once said and wrote an article, and it stuck with me. He said that when you come to the negotiating table, stakeholders tend to lie to one another at the highest levels about what they can do, when they can do it, and for how much they can do it. The reality is with the commoditization of the cloud, with these P2P solutions, I'm telling you that you have to look beyond the technology because the technology is consistently going to be reliable, and who are the people behind that? And to do that, you have to pave the way for greater relationships. You have to pave the way for collaboration between all stakeholders. And that is the key point in terms of this particular slide in this particular area. Are you in the position? Are you at the stage where you are truly going to collaborate and look beyond the technology and look to the people that are there? Now, in that context, I've got another quick quiz for you. Has P2P technology commoditized service provider solutions? In other words, and that'll be popping up on your right side, in other words, when you look to select a vendor or a partner, do you look at the technology? Do you look at Gartner? Do you look at the rankings in terms of the top 50? Or do you actually look at the organization's service provider capabilities to deliver the solution through the scrutinizing eye that the technology itself, the commoditized technology, is going to be the same as choosing a PC today? You know, whatever PC you use, whatever brand name is on it, you're pretty well assured that it's going to work. It's the service and support behind there. Do you use that kind of scrutinizing eye beyond and behind the technology? So let me pose this question. Is technology, from your perspective, commoditized? And it's a yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. And I believe we have another 45 seconds.
John, what do you think the percentages are going to look like here?
Well, you know what's interesting, and in all the time I've talked about this, I have had it all over the place depending upon whom I'm talking with. What I find, generally speaking, is the demographics of those who are more the millennial generation or are more comfortable with technology are inclined to agree with that in the vast majority. Those who have come from an era in time, and I don't want to date myself, but those who have come from an era in time in which, you know, we're dealing with the old mainframes, we're dealing with the overarching implementation periods, who haven't quite moved into the comfort of the mobile era, so to speak. They tend to favor, well, no, I'm still going to rely on, you know, no one ever got fired for buying IBM. It's got to be the technology itself that is the differentiator. Does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. I think we've got some answers now.
Okay, so 13 out of 20 said, yes, I agree, it's commoditized, and 7 out of 20 say, no, I do not agree. You know what, I got to tell you, one of the things that I love about being in front of a live audience, although I'm really happy to be here, is that I would take the time to actually go out and talk with you and say, okay, why do you feel that way? But we'll capture that at the end, I'm sure, when we save all of the questions. So keep that in mind, and that goes back to the very beginning when I talked about Churchill. Is that the fact is that the more dependent we become on the technology, the less effective it becomes, because we abdicate our responsibilities in that regard, and we say, okay, it's the technology that's going to do it. And the whole theme is, it isn't the technology. Technology is a valuable tool, but in today's world, the differentiator, as I said, are the people behind the company and what they're able to do. Let's go on to our next section. What do you need to do to align yourself to become a major contributor in the P2P world? If indeed, for those who have agreed that technology has become commoditized, then the onus falls on you to be able to align your values and present your values in a world where everyone's playing on a level playing field, at least from a technological standpoint. So, what does this mean you have to do? I love this Eric Hoffer statement, because what he talks about is, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. I mean, just ponder that for but a moment. Oftentimes, we get locked into thinking that there is a way that we can do things, and that the way we've always done it is the way they have to be done. Now I'll digress here, because I spoke to an audience, 2 different audiences at a conference last November. And they had a good mix of new people and people who've been in the industry for a little while. And I asked the question, how many of you chose to be in the procurement field? And in the past, if I got one or 2 hands up, that was a lot, because most people fell into the profession. In this case, more than 50% of the people said, wait a second. In fact, almost 3/4 said, I chose to be in this profession. I then asked another question. I said, given what you know about the profession now, if you had to choose another career path all over again, would you choose procurement? And 50% said no. Think about that for a second. 50% said no. And one of the main reasons given is that they felt, especially the up-and-coming generation, felt that they were being muted by the way in which things had always been done, that there was no stretching of the boundaries, there was no adoption in terms of the new reality of the commoditized realm of technology. So in many cases, they became frustrated, they became disillusioned. Now, ironically, you know, with the up-and-coming generation, it's not confined just to the procurement world, obviously. There's certainly a good percentage who feel that, you know, I feel disillusioned because what I thought I was getting into wasn't what I had expected. But it just struck me funny in terms of these numbers, because what it talks about, to me, is that far too often we limit ourselves by focusing on the fact that we've always done it this way, or we're not comfortable with change, and we tend to become the most proficient people at a practice that will no longer be relevant going down the road. In fact, a study came out through IACCM again that reported that the vast majority of procurement professionals become redundant. At least half of them over the next 5 years will become redundant. There'll be a redundancy. And that's a wake-up call, because that isn't even dealing with the technological aspect about which we're talking about today. So it's a general wake-up call that, look, from a procurement world, things are changing. And P2P technology and the commoditization of technology is putting more, again, the onus on us to be able to understand where and how we can expand our way of doing things, how we can transcend the functional silos that have in the past confined us to a certain duty or a certain role. Well, those roles are changing, and that's why the Hoffer quote means a great deal, because as we transition, we have to realize, and the analogy of 6 + 3 = 9, but so does 5 + 4, is a challenge to you. are you looking at the way you're doing things now and honestly assessing whether or not it aligns with where the industry is going? Or are you steadfastly staying grounded with what you know, gaining greater proficiency with what you know, but even though that proficiency's value will diminish over time? So one of the key things about P2P technology and the commoditization is that it does have an element of taking over the bulk of our responsibilities. And so the idea of using your, and you know, there's a term, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, but the Internet of Things, of humans and things, a variation. What's happening is, and how the world should work, is that technology and P2P technology is now taking over the vast majority of work that we had to do beforehand. And that means it frees us up to focus our energies, or as one once said, our genius, on strategic thinking, management by exception, and creating better processes. An example, of course, is 90% of all invoices can be managed without your intervention. Redefining your roles, that's really what this means, is you have to look at what you are doing. You have to say, okay, what do I really need to do? And as this commoditized technology begins to gain a foothold and take over all of these things, where am I going to focus my energies to be able to add value in a new world, in a changed world? And that is really where it comes into thinking outside and doing outside of the proverbial box. And that's the key. Now, if you look, the question is, how do you then leverage P2P to build and strengthen your relationships? Because we're now moving towards that area of the 10%, which is your relationship side of the equation. That goes back to what I've been saying, and you can see it's a cascading impact, a cascading effect. As technology comes in, becomes more commoditized, there's a greater demand on us to get involved. The more demand in the areas that we have to get involved deals with, and one of the key areas is the relationships with stakeholders. And if you look at that, and the structure of these relationships, and authors like Andy Akrush, who wrote the book Relationships First, The New Paradigm for Complex Contract Management, Kate Batasek, Robert Hanfield, I'll talk about these people later on. You know, they talk about a framework for a joint organizational entity, and it's centered around clearly defined mission, values and purposes, open book framework, all of these elements. If you're not familiar with these terminology, you have to become familiar, because the world is dramatically changing, and it's moving away, and technology, as it becomes more automated and more commoditized, frees you up to focus on these key areas of development that create success. I guess at the end of the day, what I'm saying is the ultimate success for your organization rests with you, not in the technology. It's a supporting role it plays. So familiarize yourself. This is the area in terms of relationship. Do you have within your organization a charter? Do you have within your organization what you call a relationship purpose and value that encompasses all stakeholders, with both internal and external to your organization? That's the key that people such as Akrush and Batasek and Hanfield are talking about. And as we progress, I ask this question, and here's another quiz. How do you currently view your relationships or governance model with external partners? Now, for the sake of clarity, and I want to present this, when we talk about governance models, and I'll start within the traditional framework, there is the network, quasi-hierarchy, and hierarchy. And this is more outward-facing with suppliers, but it is a structure of how you deal with your external stakeholders. Take a few moments to look at this and ask yourself, what kind of relationship do you have with your external suppliers in this regard?
And just as a reminder, if anybody has any questions, please submit them into the Q&A box located in the bottom right-hand corner of your window.
And by the way, I hope these definitions are fairly straightforward. Again, these have traditionally been how relationships have been defined. I'm using that as a context point of reference because relationship definitions will ultimately change in this brave new world that we're coming into. But ultimately, these have been the traditional frameworks for relationships. Okay.
I
don't see any results yet, Ashley. Do we have a few more seconds there?
It looks like we do. What are you thinking the results might look like this go round?
Well, you know, when you look at it, ultimately, I think that the majority will fall into the number 2 category, where you have organizations that are legally independent, but one has the greater influence. And that goes back to speaking of the zero-sum relationships that are there. But it ultimately depends on how the demographic makeup of your organizations. I mean, the more organizations that fall into a network environment are more reflective of the relational capabilities, and also reflective of the fact that these organizations are less inclined to put all the burden of success on the technology that their organizations or companies employ, and put more emphasis on the people behind their company. So it's kind of interesting. Now, this is an interesting group, and I haven't seen this before. Networking, implying cooperation between firms of more or less equal power which share their competencies within the chain. So, you know what's interesting with that is that, and everyone else who goes into the quasi-hierarchy and then the hierarchy standpoint, when you look at that, it'd be very interesting to see actually which of these individuals, and in fact maybe that's a question someone can pose afterwards, or we can put out to them at the end, is that why do you feel you have a network environment? Because I'd be interested in seeing that. But that's the foundation. And again, I want to go back and reaffirm what we started with the Churchill quote, is again, these things all indicate a non-reliance on technology. It's a utilization of technology, a leveraging of technology. And in the past, before the P2P evolution occurred, we couldn't do that. Now with P2P evolution, this possibility is there. And so what today's session focuses on are you positioned to take advantage? So the people who do networking, for example, who have a network relationship, are ultimately better positioned than those within a quasi-hierarchy environment to adapt to the P2P environment, because they also understand the principles of technology being a tool versus being the primary driver. Do you understand what I'm saying, Ashley? I might have lost you there.
Yes. Nope, I'm sorry. I was unmuting myself. Yes, okay. I totally understand. And it's interesting seeing these the responses, because I would have tended to have answered at number 1, networking as well.
Well, and you see, that's an interesting point, and that goes against the common. But now, here's the thing before we move on, and I don't know how we're doing for time, because I can talk about this stuff all day. But you know, it'd be interesting to find out, to dig deeper as to what networking entails. Like for you, Ashley, when you talk about networking, what does that actually mean to you?
Well, just networking with our different clients and our different members, and you know, including different innovation and different ideas to implement our processes.
Now, here's an interesting thing, and this can go out to everybody there who answered this regardless of what they chose. If they were to go out and went to, let's say, their suppliers and asked them the same question and took the same poll, do you think the results would be mirrored? Think about that for a minute. You're perceiving yourself as being networking, which is great. Are the people with whom you're networking, would they share your same sentiments? Would they share your same beliefs? That would be an interesting poll to conduct on your own afterwards. Anyway,
absolutely.
the key about this is that, well, and that's the key. Now, why is this important? Networking. Why are these relationships so important? And this is maybe another filter that goes through this. You know, in the past, again, we worked in a zero-sum world. You know, there's the Karas, and I've always been against that principle of you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. That, you know, when Kay Fantastic gave a great seminar a couple of years ago when she talked about her days at Microsoft, where she said she received incentive for getting the price down from suppliers. In other words, the lower she was able to beat down the supplier price, the more she was financially rewarded. And of course, she wrote some of the great books, Gating to We, and she talked about the fact is that in the end, this actually hurt the relationship and ultimately hurt the client. And so in a real network environment and a real relational environment, are you addressing things such as supplier liquidity issues? Which is one of the key things. You know, there's the Quick Pays initiative in the U.S. that they started. Everyone's talking about this. According to the Institute of Financial Operation, day sales outstanding are at record levels, averaging 42 days in the U.S. Now, if you're listening and you don't know what that means, You got to do some research on it, because these are critical factors. Because slow payments were linked to defective vendor invoices. These invoices accounted for 63% of past due payments. And you might say that's a vendor problem. The P2P technology now addresses and removes a lot of these challenges by automating and freeing up people to be able to focus on managing the exception. But here's the thing. If you don't understand what DSO levels mean and why that's an important figure, as a procurement professional, you need to, because that is extremely important to your partner. That's extremely important to the other members of your network relationship. And at the end of the day, there's a very tangible outcome, is that buyers who maintain positive relationships with suppliers, and this is from the automotive industry, those manufacturers that did this tended to offer the best products, best quality products at the best possible price. Yet traditionally, we have never looked at these elements as being key. We've never worried about whether or not, at least not collectively and collaboratively, whether or not our suppliers were being paid on time. Our job was to acquire and negotiate. In this realm, and with the power of the P2P freeing us up, we now have to become proficient in these areas, and to be truly networked, to be truly a good partner, we have to understand the other end of the equation, the business of our partners, of our suppliers, and what our actions have in way of impact on their ability to do business. And that's truly being relational. That's truly working on an open book framework. Things such as, and I'll digress for a moment and actually, weigh in if I'm taking up too much time. But let me give you an idea of the contrast between both of those. The I-35 Minnesota Bridge project. How many of you probably remember? I think I'm talking to you in person, so you can see your hands. I can't. But how many remember that bridge collapse? Well, Minnesota went a different direction with rebuilding that bridge for obvious reasons. They were facing a crisis. They wanted to get it done right. They wanted to honor the people who lost their lives on this. And so what they did is they created a true network environment and a relationship. And what they did is they looked at it and they said, okay, we're going to work transparently. We're going to open our books. We're going to work on a shared risk basis. The long and the short of it is with the Minnesota Bridge project, the bridge was built using an entirely new architectural process within record time, on budget, to everyone's satisfaction. Outside of a crisis situation, another bridge project in Minnesota is struggling and off the rails because they went back to their old ways of doing things. Now, that speaks to the people aspect and the responsibility in terms of people leveraging technology. Even if the technology were there and the P2P solution, I don't know what technology or application they use, was in place, that technology would have been inefficient if the people hadn't been able to get together and work together. So this goes back to the original point. P2P technology is evolutionary in that it does do all of these things. It's commoditized because it levels the playing field. You really can't go wrong from one solution to the other. But the people behind the technology, the people within your own organization, the people that come together, that is where the real leading edge breakthroughs come into play. And to do that, you need to have this open idea of communicating. You need to understand your impact. And then and only then can you leverage technology. The moment that you put that, abdicate your responsibility and put that onus onto the shoulders of technology is the moment that technology will fail to deliver and become ineffective. And that's really the whole key about this evolution. As you see, going back to what I said earlier, remembering technology becomes ineffective the more dependent we become on it. This is why. Now, let's go to the next. What are the important next steps you need to take to position yourself for success? Now, well, some of the things we've talked about right now. Recognize that the traditional way we think, the approach we have, is no longer relevant. Robert Hanfield wrote a book, and in it he said that the chasm between professionals of the older generation and the emerging professionals is unbridgeable. In other words, everything that was learned beforehand is no longer relevant going forward. There is nothing that can be taken from the past that can be used to forward to the future. And I think it goes back to what the Hoffer statement said is from your perspective and mindset, as it relates to P2P and the evolution, is that it isn't a technological evolution, it's a people evolution. It is the key to your success overall. Now, looking beyond P2P technology, you have to look to the providers behind there. You know, I wrote an article on Zycus, which was a very interesting and a very revealing article, I called it as it is. For those of you who follow my blog, I have no affinity or attachment to any particular vendor. So what you're going to get from me is a straight on biased story, and sometimes I make people happy, and other times people just want to, you know, they're not thrilled. But one of the interesting things that I observed about Zycus and companies like them, these new companies, is that they spend and put the energies and resources into the technology. They become independent of the traditional encumbrances of Wall Street and meeting market and street price expectations, and they put the emphasis on creating and providing the people to help you to leverage that commoditized technology. That is the key point that you have to look for. Who are and what are the capabilities of the people behind the technology? You have to change your mindset. Don't believe the Gartners. And I know we saw a Gartner slide earlier on here, and I've been one of the main, what you would say, I don't know if I'd call it protagonist or antagonist. No, you know what I'm saying. When it comes down to the Gartners and the Magic Quadrants and the features, functions, and benefits, they are not as relevant as you looking and seeing the people behind it and seeing what their service provider capabilities are. Remember, historically speaking, and with traditional applications, more than 80% of all e-procurement initiatives leveraging technology failed to deliver the expected results. I've written white papers on these, cited case examples, and the reality is that if you get lost in the technology, if you get lost in the Gartner Magic Quadrant rankings, you forget to look at the people behind the company. That's where trouble begins, because it isn't the technology but the people behind it. And then from there, recognizing the fact that, look, there's a change in terms of what my role and responsibility is. The technology itself is not the key differentiator, but it frees me up to do more things. You then have to look and say, how do I reposition my value proposition? And you know, this is a long-standing question. Back in 2007, a CPO agenda roundtable, which had major executives from companies such as Danone and Nestle from all around the world met. And one of the common themes that came out well, there were two actually. One was that one strategic thinker in procurement is worth 12 run-of-the-mill everyday buyers. And so the definition is, what is strategic? And I'll get to that in a moment. The other thing that came out of that, which, by the way, ruffled a lot of feathers in the procurement profession, was that the best people or person to run a purchasing department is someone who doesn't have a purchasing background. Think about those two things right there. So even before the advent of P2P evolution way back in 2007, there was a vacuum in terms of these key areas of importance. Now, what P2P does, unlike the past where everything got lost in overarching implementation spanning 1 or 2 years, and now you have things that can be, or solutions that can be implemented in a matter of weeks, if not days, now the emphasis and the spotlight is on people. So you have to look at that and take that information that has been around for a long time and say, how am I going to reposition my value? I have a system that is, with P2P evolution, that automates 90% of my job. That's why, again, the IACCM study said a vast majority of people will become redundant over the next few years. P2P technology, because of what it can do, because it is commoditized, because it is affordable and accessible, because it can be implemented in weeks and days, means that you don't need the body count. You don't need as many people. And so those who are going to stand out and continue onward are going to be the individuals that can demonstrate their value in the key areas that we touched on today. So going with that, and let's revisit in the end, and this, you know, it's up to you, almost like an Uncle Sam point. You know, realistically speaking, P2P capability is defined by what you do with the freedom the technology gives you. The technology, you don't have to worry about, it'll work. Regardless of the service provider you deal with, you can count on the fact that it'll work. It's the people behind that. Now, with that, let's go back and revisit the original quiz, Ashley, and ask the question, how will P2P impact your job? Now you look at it from what we started, and hopefully with the information insight I provide. And by the way, you may not necessarily agree with everything I said. You may wonder, you know, is this some guy who just walked in off the street, or has had multiple blows to the head? Now, you know, in the old days, I used to have that a lot, not so much anymore. But ask yourself this question in this survey. Let's revisit it now and say, how will P2P impact your job? And I think Ashley has posted it up there. So Ashley, has it changed your mind a little bit?
I've always been a fan of P2P just because we do have such an excellent relationship with Zycus, and they do tend to touch on this when they give presentations. So I'm a firm believer, and I hope that a lot of people do reply that, you know, it will significantly impact them.
Now, let me ask you this, because, you know, and again, Zycus, thank you. You're a gracious host on this, but I'm sure it may not be the common discussion of saying, you know, it's commoditized, where one vendor to the next from a technological standpoint, there's really not much to differentiate them because functions and features, well, there may be some different bells and whistles will change. But in reality, would you not agree that it's the people behind the company, their ability to deliver service, their ability to free up that 90% and to be able to implement that? Is that not a key differentiator? Or am I way off base, Ashley?
No, I definitely would agree with that. It's a next practice, and not all companies have adapted to this change. And, you know, some it makes more sense for, but I would say more times than not, just from my experience with being at SIG, it does tend to help a lot of our members specifically. Let's see what the results say, though. I think we've got them all in.
Ooh.
There we go. That's a good answer.
So now, how did that change from the first time we asked that question? I think there's a big difference. No, I don't remember. My memory is not as good as it used to be.
I think it has jumped up from the first poll.
Well, everybody
so
listening.
You changed your mind.
Well, everybody listening, you know what? You have a chance to ask questions, and on an on-demand basis, I'm sure these results will be here as well. So I guess now let's move to some of the questions. You know, Ashley, again, I turn to you. What questions are there out there?
Sure, we've got a few that have come in, and I'm sure we'll get some more. We do tend to get them towards the end of the presentation, but we've got a few already in the bank. So the first one being, you talk about the need to focus on strategic thinking and management by exception. Haven't these always been attributes of a sound procurement practice? And if so, what is different now?
Well, I think it comes down to the difference between desire and ability. Remember, I referred to that 2007 CPO Agenda Roundtable discussion where they said, give me one strategic thinker who's worth 12 buyers, or the best people to head up a procurement department is someone who doesn't come from procurement. The desire has always been there. With P2P technology and the commoditization of the technology that drives the procurement process, now we have the freedom to be able to do that. And the real question then comes in, what are procurement professionals going to do with that freedom? Are they going to be equipped, or are the associations geared towards giving them the curriculums, and many are striving to change them, are they going to give them the curriculum to think beyond the familiar framework of what their role and responsibility are in the organization? That's really the differentiator. In the past, we had intent. Now we have true opportunity.
Sure, we've got another one that just came in. What responsibility do procurement professionals have in terms of making significant contributions to their organization?
Well, I think, and again, it goes back with free time. Now you have the time. Now you have to get involved. Remember I talked about DSO? It would have been a great poll to see how many procurement people are familiar with DSO and its importance. But I use that slide as an example simply because you have to now familiarize yourself with a broader understanding, a more holistic understanding of your enterprise. In essence, you have to look at why does that matter? Day sales outstanding. You know, that never mattered to me before, or for the majority it hasn't. Why should that matter now? Why should vendor financing matter to me, and the suppliers getting paid on a timely basis? All of these attributes involve thinking beyond the narrow scope that Kate Batasic had referred to when she was with Microsoft, is that, you know, what's the best price I can get, or the zero-sum game that has been a hallmark of our industry for far too long. And I'm not saying that it's not changing, but its prevalence is still there. Its imprint and its influence over the business. So that's really the key. You have to start looking at areas of the operation, not only within your own enterprise and understanding these things, but looking beyond that to the impact of the business and doing business with your suppliers. Broaden your perspective, and now with P2P technology and its commoditization, you now have the time to do that. Does that answer your question?
I think so. It wasn't mine of my own, but I'm sure we'll get follow-up if it wasn't completely answered. Just as a reminder, we will be toggling back to Rohit. He will be speaking about the Horizon event. We have a couple more questions to get through, and then we'll toggle back over to him. The next question that just popped in, and I know that you have covered it, but maybe this person just needed a little bit more clarification. When you say e-procurement technology is becoming commoditized, what do you mean?
Well, basically, okay, and let's use an analogy with microcomputers, and I'll date myself. Back in the early days of PCs, you had Compaq, you had IBM, you had Columbia, and everyone worked on a proprietary basis, where only certain cards would work with certain technologies. And what they did is they tried to protect the market by making themselves uniquely different technological-wise, so that you were locked into dealing with them. Nowadays, when you deal with technology, it's all plug and play. Whether you buy HP, XYB brand, or whatever, the brand is largely irrelevant to you. When you buy a PC today, you're not worried about compatibility. When you buy a PC today, you're going to look at overall, generally, terms that apply, speed, functionality, support if I need support. And so what's happened is the PC industry is now commoditized. That's why you no longer pay $13,000 for an Apple II with a green phosphorus screen and a dot matrix printer. You know, I mean, that's what those systems used to cost way back then. So the cost of these solutions have come down. Well, think of e-procurement technology in much the same way. What happened is there's been a streamlining of capabilities. Efficiencies are there, and while there are some unique functions and looks, just like there are looks in different PC styles, the basic core foundation of e-procurement technology is now commoditized. You can literally go and no disrespect to Zycus, but I tell the truth in terms of my perspective, you could buy a Zycus, a Coupa, an XYZ solution, any one that's out there, and you are going to get a platform that works. It may have some differences, it may have some nuance to look and feel to it, but at the end of the day, the foundational elements are, I have never run into anyone who said, if I buy Zycus, it's going to fall apart, or if I use Coupa, it's going to blow up. The real issue is behind that technology are the people who are able to support it and implement it. Are they able to do it? Now that's where these new wave companies are coming, the P2P, the true P2P players. I'm not talking about the old ERP-based technology, or even going back to the old basic 4 days of industry-specific applications, or even the intervening suppliers that are scrambling to try to cloud up their solutions. I'm talking about the true cloud-based players like a Zycus, like a Coupa, like those organizations. You can't go wrong with the technology. Where you will go wrong is if you don't have the relationship and understanding of the resources behind the technology and be able to work with them to make it happen. And that's the real key. You can't commoditize people and skill sets of these organizations, but the technology is. So now you're free not to be dazzled by bells and whistles or Magic Quadrant ratings, which by and large, and remember, Magic Quadrant has been around a long time, yet it didn't prevent all of these features, function, benefit, top 50, didn't prevent 80% of all e-procurement initiatives from failing. The key is now the technology is not the issue. It will work. You have to now look behind the company.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. We have time for one more question, then we'll switch over back to Rohit. So how has the relationship with stakeholders, particularly suppliers, changed or evolved over the years?
Well, I think right off the bat, we've moved from that Karas mindset of you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate, mindset where there is a zero-sum game. There has to be a winner and a loser. The Minnesota, this is the interesting thing because it's the biggest paradox, the biggest challenge we as an industry and business in general is going to run into. You know, I gave you that example of the Minnesota Bridge Project, the I-35, and the success of that initiative, yet on the very next one, outside of the realms of a crisis, they fell back into their old patterns of doing business, belt with suspender negotiation, risk calculation, all these things, and that project went off the rails. There's other examples. Reno, for example, had a good group of people coming together where they did the convention center. You know, IBM came to town. They went to Reno very early on. You know, this is a long time ago. were not happy with the facility, said, listen, unless things change within the next year, we're pulling, going elsewhere. And of course, to a city, a convention the size of IBM would be a significant loss. Within a year, they were able to bring convention facilities up to specs and had IBM for many, many years. And there's other examples. Well, what's happened here is that these pockets of success, relational success, have not been scalable to this point in time. And a lot of the distractions has been because of the technology. But now what's changing is that people are starting to look at it and they're starting to say, wait a second, you know, what does it mean to be relational? What does it mean? That goes back to the network quiz. What does it really mean? Do we have open book framework? Do we have full transparency? Do we have a collaborative group of people coming together as a separate entity in and of itself with all key stakeholders to be able to not only start on this initial project, but to manage it through, including the unanticipated changes? Those are the key areas that are beginning to shift and change. They are looking for scalability to duplicate the successes, so it doesn't become a matter of the right circumstances, hit or miss right circumstances coming together at the right time under the right crisis conditions. They're looking to build models, and that's where Akrusha's book, that's where Vitasic, and that's where Handfield talk about the methodology of bringing people together, and it's an act of will. That's the biggest change that's happening. And if you're in an organization and you mark network, that's why I said it'd be interesting to go to the other side, run the same poll, and ask your stakeholders on the other side, well, how do you feel we're doing? Are we really a network relationship? That'll be your litmus test. But that's the real change. It's moving from one of collaboration, moving from one of adversarial, what can I get, to one of collaboration and communication in an open and transparent environment. Does that answer the question?
Yes, John, that does answer the question. We are going to transition over to Rohit for a minute. He's going to speak with us for just a second about Horizon. Rohit, feel free to take it away.
Hey, thank you so much, Ashley. And you know, John, I was just kind of pondering during the question, you know, how has P2P impacted your career? And I would say without doubt, you know, that has impacted my career significantly on a lighter note though. So anyways, taking it forward and just talking a little bit about Horizon, although there it goes. So, for you know, for the benefit of everyone, Horizon, as some of you may be aware, you know, Horizon 2016 is the annual procurement conference hosted by Zycus, and it's scheduled to take place between October 23rd and 25th at the Ritz-Carlton Dove Mountain, Arizona. This is the 5th year of our Horizon event, which we are going to conduct. Horizon is 3 days of discussion around new procurement trends, inspirational stories, starting with none other but America's space legend, Captain Mark Kelly, who is going to be our keynote speaker this year at Horizon. With over 100 companies attending the event from across industry sections, Horizon 2016 would be an ideal platform for you to exchange notes with over 200 procurement professionals around the globe. For those who wish to register for this event, since you're part of this webinar, we are happy to offer a promo code which is WBR100, which would provide you with a $100 discount on your registration. We look forward to meeting you all at this conference of us, and with that, I hand it back to Ashley.
All right, Ashley just had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we are going to go ahead and close today's session out. Thank you so much for joining today. John, you did a fantastic job presenting. I am going to put John's contact information back on the screen. Feel free to reach out with him with any questions that you might have regarding today's presentation. And with that, John, I'll let you have the final word.
The final word, whoa, gee, okay. So, you know, I guess ultimately going back in, the one key takeaway, and going back to the original statement that I had made, and the ponderance that you should take away is this: technology becomes ineffective the more dependent we become on it. Therefore, when we talk about being leading edge, we must look beyond the technology to the people behind it. And the question you have to ask yourself is, Am I looking to the people behind the technology? Am I looking to the people involved in the relationships that I have and the key stakeholder engagements that I'm doing? That's the key takeaway. If you do that, you'll be positioned for the P2P evolution and the evolution of our industry overall. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed today's presentation and have a great rest of the day. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.